Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Damascus Radio, and it's time for news for tonight, joined by Khalid Sakhlani and Basim Bagdash. Information Minister Omran Zobi stressed that the situation in the country is now better than any previous time in the course of conspiracy against Syria, and that in terms of security, the crisis is almost over. In an interview with the Syrian TV on Friday, Zobi said, the scene in Syria has become clear as everybody now knows the identity and place of the enemy as well as its military and political support channels, external backers and internal tools. The minister said, when we speak of victory, we mean the victory for Syria through foiling the external conspiracy and its internal tools. On the policies of the Turkish government, Minister Zobi stressed that the Turkish government is providing enormous service to Israel. As for the statements of the Egyptian President Mohammed Morsi, Zobi said that Egypt had always been and still is Syria's partner in all historic stages, adding that if Egypt restored its pan-Arab role, it will find that the extension of that role is in Damascus and not in other Arab capitals. Regarding Iran's stances, as Zobi said, the Iranian stance has been clear since the start of the crisis. Tehran stands by the Syrian people and the state. This stance is identical with the stances of Russia and China and all friendly countries. He stressed that Saudi Arabia and Turkey constitute a part of the aggression on Syria. Therefore, if their intentions are good, they must halt providing the gunmen and terrorists with funds and weapons and stop media instigation against Syria as a demonstration of goodwill. He called upon the Syrians abroad to return to their homeland, saying it's true that the circumstances were difficult and they had to leave, but no one closed the door behind them. Iranian Foreign Minister Ali Akbar Salehi has stressed from Tehran today that it is important that crisis be solved peacefully, saying, we will not allow the states with money and military might to impose their wills on the region. In reply to a question regarding the West's not feeling comfortable at Iran's efforts to solve the Syrian crisis, Salehi said that the West always tries to defame Iran's reputation before the world public opinion, but facts always prove the opposite, namely that Iran is an influential and capable state in the area. Khalid?
Thank you, Basim. The Deputy Chairman of the Russian State Duma and the Vice Chairman of the Communist Party at the Russian Federation, Ivan Melkanov, has said that Russia is defending the international law with its position regarding Syria. In a speech delivered at the International Parliamentarians Conference held in Strasbourg on Friday, Melkanov said that Russia is committed to the international law, noting that the absence of this law, the world resorts to the law of force. He also affirmed that the International Committee should not impose the specific courses on independent countries and that Russia is supporting the gradual, non-violence-free changes in the Arab world. Melnikov also said that the liberal values of the Western Democrats cannot always be used in an argument to evaluate the Arab government's questions in the validity of the human intervention that carries out the intervention scenarios under the pretext of protecting the human rights. He also warned the West that the attempts to impose the values of the cultures and countries on others leads to results that cannot be seen what is desired. The leaders of the Change and the Reform parliamentary bloc in Lebanon, Michel Aoun, has ruled out any Western military intervention in Syria, asserting that the crises in Syria will end either through holding the political dialogue or by the defeat of the opposition, despite mobilizing large numbers of the Qaeda members to be sent to Syria. In an interview with the Lebanese Al-Akhbar newspaper published on Saturday today, Aoun said that Syria is stanch despite the siege imposed by the Western countries against it. He also pointed out that summoning the Western ambassadors from Syria does not mean that the country has collapsed, as the Syrian foreign policy is still strong and coherent. On the ground here in Syria, the armed forces on Saturday today destroyed a warehouse for the ammunition and weapons, killing the number of terrorists inside the Sayyid Ali area near the Wali restaurant in the city of Aleppo. The armed forces also discovered a hideout for an armed terrorist group inside the 4th Industrial Institute in the Suleiman al-Halabi area in Aleppo. The armed forces cleared out the hideout from the terrorists. In Beijing, in Damascus's countryside, a unit of the army forces carried out successful operations in which they killed numbers of terrorists and they arrested others, seizing their weapons, and they also discovered a stolen medical equipment warehouse that had smuggled medication there. Back to you, Basim.
Thank you, Khalid. In Homs, the competent authorities pursued an armed terrorist group in Al-Baqi'a area in Tel Kalakh countryside, killing and wounding its members and confiscating their weapons. A source in the province said that among the terrorists killed were Yusuf Suleiman Fawaz and another who had 3 identity cards, Syrian, Palestinian and Lebanese with the same name. Another unit of the armed forces inflicted heavy losses upon an armed terrorist group as it was trying to infiltrate into Syria from Lebanon on Multaqa al-Nahrain area in Tel Kalakh countryside. The competent authorities destroyed a car equipped with Dushka machine gun and eliminated 2 of the terrorists who were driving it in al-Dusayriye in Tel Kalakh countryside. In another development, the competent authorities, with the help of the citizens, chased the armed terrorist groups which were terrifying the citizens and the law enforcement forces in Het Valley in Nawa region in Daraa countryside, inflicting heavy losses on them. Sana reporters said a source in the governorate mentioned that the competent authorities killed the head of the terrorist groups in Het Valley, Mahmoud al-Aishat, and arrested the rest of the group, confiscated their weapons and a large amount of stolen food supplies. The source also said that the confrontation resulted in the destruction of 4 cars carrying different types of weapons. The source mentioned that a unit of our armed forces confronted with the terrorist armed group in a Sanamain city, killing one of the terrorists who had no identity card, and arrested the rest of the group members. In Idlib Governorate, competent authorities clashed with an armed terrorist group in Ahsim in a Zawiya mountain. The authorities also clashed with an armed terrorist group that tried to attack a security point at the crossing of Martin village in Idlib countryside. News correspondent reported a source at the governorate as saying that the Syrian army units chased the terrorist group that tried to flee towards the bushes surrounding the city. The clash resulted in the death and the injury of a number of terrorists and the martyrdom of 1 law enforcement member. And in Latakia, competent authorities confiscated 30 kilograms of C4 material in al-Mashru' al-Sabi' neighborhood, seized weapons and ammunition in al-Tabayit neighborhood, and confiscated 1,200 boxes of stolen medical items in Shretih neighborhood. Back to you, Khalid.
Thank you, Basim. The Ministry of Information said that 3 members of the opposition's coordination committee were kidnapped by terrorists on the highway that leads to the airport in Damascus. In a statement released on Friday, yesterday, the ministry said that the kidnapped persons are Abdelaziz al-Khayr and Ilyas al-Ayash, in addition to Maher al-Tahan. The ministry pointed out that the authorities launched investigations urging the perpetrators to release the kidnapped persons immediately, warning them of the legal repercussions of this action. The imams and the preachers of the mosques in Syria on Friday have strongly condemned the Saudi Arabian government's prevention of the Syrian people from making the pilgrimage the 5th pillar of Islam this year. During the ceremonies at the Friday prayers, the preachers noted that the Saudi Hajj, the pilgrimage, the ministry statements on Thursday, have affirmed that the deliberate prevention with regard to the pilgrimage measures for Syria and obstructing them from the Syrians. The preachers also wondered, how does the Saudi government, which claims its guardianship over the two holy mosques, allow itself from preventing the Syrian pilgrimage and for the Muslims to make the pilgrimage? They also held the Saudi government religiously and morally responsible for this prevention, saying that this comes in response to the framework of its desire for more hostility and conspiracy against Syria. The preachers also denounced the Saudi Arabian kingdom from its intent to turn this religious obligation into a political decision, to pass it as part of its Wahhabi political stances against the Syrian people. The United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Nafi Pillay, said that he described the anti-Islam video and the cartoons that were published in the French magazine as evil and internationally provocative. Meanwhile, in France, the authorities have banned all protests against the cartoons encroaching upon Prophet Muhammad within a firm security campaign. The French Foreign Minister, Laurent Fabius, said that his country will keep on with its measures to close down all the embassies on Saturday and Sunday as a precautionary measure. Back to you, Basim.
Thank you very much, Khalid. Chief of Staff of the Iranian Armed Forces, General Hassan Fayrouz Abadi, has stressed that there are no Iranian forces in any country, including Syria. Abadi said if Iran has to have forces in any place, this should be arranged according to international decisions. In a comment on the military drills the U.S. and 25 other states are currently conducting, Abadi said, those drills form no threats to us, and in an answer to a question about Iran's response in case of an Israeli and U.S. attack against Iran, Abadi said the answer to diplomacy will be diplomatic, but a war would be the reply to a war. The Bahraini police have detained 29 protesters for demanding political reforms in the country. The French news agency pointed out that the police used tear gas and sonic bombs against the protesters, injuring many. It is to be noted that Bahrain has been witnessing popular protest demonstrations since February the 14th last year, demanding constitutional and political reforms, along with a newly elected government. The Bahraini authorities, however, have always met those demonstrations with force and oppressive measures, supported by the Gulf Cooperation Council states, which deployed the island's shield forces in Bahrain to back up Khalifa's family. And now over to the final item with my colleague Khalid.
Thank you, Basim. The harsh sentences of a Turkish court against the former generals in the Turkish army has aroused the fury and condemnation among the Turkish secular parties and the families of the generals. The Turkish secular circles denounced the accusations and the trials, describing them as an act of oppression to silence the opposition and to pave the way for the country to go back to the religious rule that prevailed during the Ottoman era. Members of the generals' sentences shouted slogans against the jury, and they denounced the verdicts, while the public threw water glasses or water bottles at the court, while others repeated the lyrics of the Turkish national anthem.
The end of our news for tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. Damascus Radio presents News and Views.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. In parallel with wide-scale protests against the American anti-Islam film, a French magazine rushed to publish drawings that offend Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Apparently, this is a message of solidarity with other offenses, the aim of which is to insult a heavenly religion, the worshippers in which exceeded 1,700,000 people. As a matter of course, that message of solidarity in offending a heavenly religion was woven under the pretext of freedom of opinion, or an expression of the culture of hatred and enmity, so to speak. Shamefully, that message was intimated by politicians within the folds of Western communities towards Islam, the religion, the culture, and the life. Explicitly, the step made by the French magazine can be ostensibly apprehended within the frame of solidarity with the director of the film that offended Islam. However, in reality, the message implicitly came as a result of the environment which has been for years injected with scraps and distorted stance that deliberately offended Islam and displays it as an enemy of life and humanity. In order to comprehend how the Western politicians could implement the plot against Islam, one should notice several questions. Contrary to what is maintained by some, the Western stand towards Islam, or the political Islam, for counseling the essence of enmity, has not started with the disintegration of the Soviet Union. The Western colonialist campaigns to which most of the Arab states were subjected during the first decades of last century have worked out tightening the grip onto these states. The target was to subvert religious institutions as well as marginalizing their role in public life, beside defacing its image and the Western peoples through lashing out several accusations and fabrications like backwardness and liggery.
That was News and Views from Damascus Radio. Damascus Radio presents Syrian Local Press Review.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. The papers published today gave prominence to the following headlines and new items. The competent authorities seized 30 kilograms of C4 explosives in Latakia, where they also terminated a group possessing motor cannons and 2 Doshka-equipped vehicles in Aleppo. Besides, the army units confiscate 2 freezing trucks loaded with weapons and ammunition in Idlib. The army command states that the Hajar al-Aswad area is completely cleaned of terrorists, as tens of terrorists are killed in Damascus countryside, Aleppo and Homs. Minister of Information Adnan Omran stresses that President al-Assad hasn't given any interview or statement to any Egyptian newspaper or magazine. Deputy Prime Minister for Economic Affairs himself, Minister of Internal Trade and Consumer Production, Dr. Qadri Jamil, affirms that he, however, speak about the TV interview he gave. He did not watch the whole interview, rather, he extracted one sentence and built it and an all-over evaluation of it, but in the wrong direction. A well-informed source in the Military of Religious Endowments and the Ministry of Religious Endowments states that the agreement of pilgrimage was concluded in Rajab according to the Hijri calendar, whereas Saudi Arabia says it is still deliberating after 4 months. On their part, the mosque's imams deplore the Saudi stance, saying that the pilgrimage rituals belong to the Almighty God and they do not belong to the al-Saudi family. The Iranian nuclear program is on the front lines of political confrontations amongst a member of the world community. Freedom has witnessed the lashes of allegations and lying, while it was hand-twisted by the political paradoxes which have switched the attitudes at an eye blink. Outrageously, Western capitals and the Arab Spring brag the stand of imposing embargoes, the sustained freedom of expression, which is the crux of today's editorial in a Thora Daily, has split it into a tight siege. That freedom was tied up by the notion assertion that protest is possible or available in the lightest. At the same time, the gun which went rusty defending freedom is now the same tool that aimed the bullet and liquidated freedom. Yet reason is not disabled to recognize the Western hypocrisy, which has always been watching and observing the violation of the basic and simplest basics for people's rights under the freedom mottos. Thus, freedom itself turned into a field of clash and overt preaching, especially when it conflicts with Western interest and paper complaints.
That was a review of the Syrian local press issued in Damascus this morning.
Damascus Radio presents Welcome to Syria. A weekly program prepared and presented by Rashid Hailesh. Directed by Suhail Khoui. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Welcome to this new edition of Welcome to Syria. Amrit lies about 7 kilometers to the south of Tartus and is considered one of the oldest Phoenician cities. Archaeological finds in Amrit show that it dates back to the 3rd millennium BC. It was the time when the Canaanites began to build seaports on the Mediterranean coast. Historical documents show that Amrit is a complete city, but the largest part remains buried underground. Amrit contains a unique temple dating back to the 5th century BC. This temple is carved in rock about 8 meters deep, 36 meters long, and 49 meters wide. It's actually a water spring which pours into Amrit's river is called the Sacred Spring. To the east of the temple, a number of burial chambers are scattered in the rocks. About 100 meters to the south of Amrit, a tower with huge stones is still standing. It consists of 2 stories, with each story having its own gate. Amrit also contains the remnants of a large stadium with a capacity for 11,000 spectators. It dates back to the 16th century BC, where sports games began in Amrit in the 14th century BC, about 700 years before the Greek Olympic Games first took place. In 1992, the Amrit port was excavated and items of pottery utensils, mosaic paintings, and marble cables of columns were uncovered. Ladies and gentlemen, you'll be listening to Welcome to Syria. A weekly program prepared and presented by Rashid Haidar and directed by Suhaib Furi.
Radio Damascus presents A Call for Justice. American reports have recently disclosed that a suicide among American troops in the month of July this year hit a record, as 26 American soldiers did commit suicide in that month, including 12 from the American National Guard. 8 cases in the American Navy Infantry Force were suspected of having committed suicide in July. The remarkable rise in the number of American Army suiciders has confused both government and Army spokesmen, who hoped the drop of combat activity in recent months would reduce the rate of suicide cases. In statements at the American Congress last month, American Defense Secretary Leon Panetta described the suicide rate as epidemic. On his part, John Lloyd Austin, the Deputy Chief of Staff, commented on this phenomenon, saying, "Suicide is the archest enemy I've confronted during my service in the Army over the past 37 years. Addressing the media earlier this year, American Chief of Staff Ray Odierno said suicide is the main cause of death in the Army and is ahead of the death cases caused by combat activity. The American Armed Forces reportedly witnessed 154 cases in the first 7 months of 2012, representing 50% increase compared to the statistics of the same period last year. The same statistics indicated that the highest suicide rate occurred among the ranks of experienced officers. Military analyst Bruce Shahbaz told US Today that the rise of the suicide rates, despite the halt of combat activity, is probably due to the post-traumatic disturbances the soldiers suffer from after their return home and the psychological conflicts they endure. The first records of suicide cases in the American Army were opened in 2009. According to the American Old Veterans Affairs Department, more than 1,000 previous soldiers had committed suicide during the 4 years that preceded the formation date, that is 18 suicide cases per day. The Army Times Daily said that 2009 alone witnessed 1,898 suicide cases, and the year before, that is 2008, also saw the highest suicide rate since the Vietnam War. The war on Iraq has produced so many criminals among the war veterans after their return home. It's been said that they had been misled when they were told that they were fighting to spread democracy among Central Asian states and they would be received by roses by the peoples of those countries that suffered from persecution, but they found themselves facing an increasing isolation and hatred by the peoples of the invaded states. That was A Call for Justice, prepared and presented by Juhayna Hafez. Radio Damascus presents Arab Civilization. A weekly program prepared and presented by Juhayna Hafez. Pottery shards discovered in Ugarit tell the story of this kingdom in different political, economic, social and cultural features and reveal the grandeur of ancient Latakia. The excavation works carried out in the old city of Latakia indicate that the current city was the southern suburb of Ugarit. According to head of Latakia Antiquity Directorate, the peak of Ugarit's prosperity was in the modern Bronze Age, from 1200 to 1600 BC, when it was an economic linkage between Cyprus and other civilizations in the Mediterranean. The archaeological findings uncovered in the city are kept in the Syrian museums of Damascus, Aleppo, Latakia, and Tartus, in addition to the Louvre Museum in Paris. The most important findings of all is the tablet containing the Ugarit alphabet, which is preserved in the National Museum in Damascus. This tablet is only a finger size, yet the 30 Ugarit alphabetical symbols were engraved on it. The Ugarit alphabet is considered the oldest in the world, which replaced the system of the then spread syllable writing with the modern style of writing as we know it today. The site of Ugarit provides many archaeological findings that reflect the way of life back then, including holy sculptures, ivory furniture, weapons, metal and pottery pots. Head of Ugarit site, Ghassan Al-Qayyim, said the Ugarit pottery and jars were of high artistic nature, adding that some of them are preserved in the Louvre Museum, quoting the Greek poet Homer as saying, "There are no pots that compete the beauty of the Ugarits." Al-Qayyim pointed out that 75-year excavation works could only uncover a quarter of the whole city. He said the tablets could tell us a lot about the life of Ugarit Kingdom, indicating that the people of the old city were famous for manufacturing wood, metal, pottery, jars, and textile, and they used to plant wheat and barley, which were all exported abroad. That was a new edition of Arab Civilization broadcast from Radio Damascus.
You're listening to Damascus Radio, the broadcasting service of the Syrian Arab Republic. Before we sign off with the national anthem, here is a final look at the news summary.
The Information Minister Amran al-Zahbi stresses that the situation in the country is now better than the previous time in the course of the conspiracy against Syria. From Tehran, the Iranian Foreign Minister Ali Akbar Salehi stresses that it is important for the crisis to be solved peacefully. The leaders of the Change and the Reform bloc, Michel Aoun, rules out the Western military intervention in Syria. The armed forces destroy a warehouse for the ammunition weapons, and they kill a number of terrorists in the Sayyid Ali area near the Wali restaurant in the city of Aleppo. In Homs, the competent authorities pursue an armed terrorist group in the Baqia area in Tel Kalakh countryside, killing and wounding members of the group and confiscating their weapons. The imams and the preachers of the mosques in Syria, strongly condemn the Saudi government's prevention of the Syrian people from making the pilgrimage, the fifth pillar of Islam. And the Chief of Staff of the Iranian Armed Forces, General Hassan Fayrouz Abadi, stresses that there are no Iranian forces in any country, including Syria.
With that, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of our transmission for tonight. Until we meet again tomorrow at the same time and on the same frequencies, we wish you all the best from Damascus Radio, the broadcasting service of the Syrian Arab Republic. Good